Hello and welcome to Deep Dive from SmartBookWorms, where we dive deep into recently released books from authors you love to read. My name is Martina, your virtual book guru. In today's episode, we'll be diving deep into a deep dive for Sacrilege by Barbara Avon, a psychological horror novel that explores the dark side of human nature and the consequences of unchecked desire. Today, I'm accompanied by the knowledgeable virtual book guru, Amanda. So let's dive deep into today's deep dive, Barbara Avon's Sacrilege.
Part 1. The Boarding House, a character in itself. The boarding house in Sacrilege is more than just a setting. It's practically a character itself, mirroring the inner lives of the people who reside there. Physically, the boarding house is decrepit and oppressive, reflecting the emotional states of its inhabitants. It's described as weathered by years of neglect, with pigeon excrement dripping down the red brick. Critics of the book have noted how this rundown state mirrors the character's emotional decay. The boarding house acts as a place of transition, a way station for those seeking escape from their pasts. Chris, the former priest, arrives seeking to disappear. Jules, who runs the boarding house, is also trying to cope with loss and a difficult relationship. The boarding house, with its secrets and strange residents, acts as a pressure cooker, forcing its inhabitants to confront the things they are running from. The building itself has a history connected to Jules's past, adding another layer of complexity to the story. It reveals that the boarding house was once a church, directly connected to Chris's past and the sin he is running from. This twist traps the characters not just physically, but also spiritually in a place of darkness. The boarding house also functions as a space where Jules tells stories to Ella, the young girl who visits, as a way to escape and create beauty in a bleak world. Chris finds himself drawn to protect Ella, perhaps tapping into his priestly instincts to help those in need. The critics are divided on their opinions of Sacrilege, with some praising its exploration of difficult themes, while others find it too dark and disturbing. However, they agree that the boarding house plays a significant role in the story's haunting atmosphere.
Part 2. Manifestations of the Supernatural in Sacrilege. The book provides several instances where the supernatural is present in the story. These instances often intersect with the character's mental and emotional states, blurring the lines between reality and the paranormal. Chris's visions. After leaving the priesthood, Chris begins experiencing visions. He sees Ella and her father after their deaths, as well as the deceased mother of a former parishioner. These visions are likely fueled by his guilt over past events and his consumption of alcohol and pills. It's suggested that his substance abuse could be contributing to his hallucinations. Jules's encounters. Jules also claims to see Ella after the girl's death, particularly when under the influence of alcohol. She searches for validation from Chris, who initially dismisses her claims as a result of her grief and drinking. However, Chris eventually admits to seeing Ella as well, leading to uncertainty about the nature of these experiences. The boarding house's transformation. The revelation that the boarding house was once a church, specifically St. Anthony's Parish, adds a spiritual dimension to the story. This connection to Chris's past and his feelings of guilt suggests that the house itself could be a conduit for supernatural activity. The presence of demons. The novel uses the word demons, both literally and metaphorically. Chris wrestles with his inner demons, representing his personal struggles and guilt. However, the presence of literal demons is also suggested, particularly in association with Ella's ghost. One source describes demons huddled around Jules, their fangs dripped scarlet ichor in anticipation. This description could be literal or a metaphorical representation of the evil surrounding the characters. The narrative presents the supernatural in a way that leaves room for interpretation. It's unclear whether the visions are genuine paranormal encounters or manifestations of the characters' psychological states. This ambiguity adds to the story's unsettling atmosphere and raises questions about the nature of faith, guilt, and the afterlife.
Part 3. A Place of Transition and Turmoil. The boarding house in Sacrilege. The boarding house in Sacrilege is more than just a setting. It acts as a mirror to the characters' inner struggles and a catalyst for their confrontations with the past. A reflecting image of decay, the book emphasizes the boarding house's state of disrepair. The building is weathered by years of neglect, with pigeon excrement that drip down the red brick like the tears too often spent by the righteous souls who slumbered within. This physical decay mirrors the emotional states of its residents, including Chris, who has lost his faith and carries a heavy burden of guilt, and Jules, who is struggling to cope with loss and a troubled relationship. A temporary haven for lost souls, the very nature of a boarding house, with its transient residents, underscores the theme of seeking escape. Chris, the fallen priest, arrives hoping to disappear from his past. Jules, burdened by her own sorrows, finds a strange solace in running the boarding house, providing temporary shelter to others who are also searching for a place to belong. A catalyst for confrontation, the boarding house becomes a pressure cooker, intensifying the characters' internal conflicts and forcing them to face their demons. The building itself has a hidden history, a connection to Jules's past that adds another layer of complexity to the story. This history culminates in the shocking revelation that the boarding house was once a church, specifically St. Anthony's Parish. This discovery forces Chris to confront the sin he has been running from and ties him to the building in a way he never could have imagined. Storytelling as escape. Within this unsettling environment, Jules finds a unique way to cope with her pain. She tells stories to Ella, the young girl who visits the boarding house. This act of storytelling provides Jules with a temporary escape from the bleak reality of her life and offers Ella a glimpse of beauty and hope. Unlikely bonds and tragedy. The boarding house becomes the unlikely setting for a bond to form between Chris and Ella. He is drawn to protect her from her abusive father, perhaps tapping into his lingering priestly instincts to care for those in need. However, this bond is tragically cut short by the deaths of both Ella and her father. This event further darkens the atmosphere of the boarding house and underscores the pervasive theme of loss and the enduring power of the past. Beyond its physical presence, the boarding house is imbued with a sense of the supernatural, as both Chris and Jules report seeing Ella's ghost within its walls. The novel never definitively explains whether these encounters are genuine paranormal phenomena or manifestations of the character's psychological distress. This ambiguity adds to the unsettling atmosphere of the boarding house, making it a place where the boundaries between reality and the spectral world become blurred.
Part 4. A Complicated and Doomed Love. Chris and Jules's Relationship in Sacrilege. The love story in Sacrilege is not a typical romance. It is a complex and messy relationship born out of shared trauma and fueled by a desire for escape, ultimately leading to a tragic end. A bond forged in brokenness, Chris and Jules are drawn to each other because of their shared experiences with loss and their longing for connection. Chris, the fallen priest, arrives at the boarding house seeking to escape his past and the guilt he carries. Jules, struggling to cope with the loss of her baby and an abusive relationship, finds a strange comfort in running the boarding house, providing temporary shelter for others who are also searching for a sense of belonging. The book highlights the characters' vulnerability and their need for solace, creating a foundation for their connection. Shared darkness and escapism. As Chris and Jules spend more time together, they find themselves drawn to each other's darkness. They bond over their shared experiences with death, loss, and grief. They drink together, blurring the lines between reality and illusion and seeking temporary escape from their pain. Note how Chris finds himself sullying what was left of their union by drinking with Jules, highlighting the destructive nature of their relationship. Moments of tenderness amidst turmoil. Despite the darkness and dysfunction surrounding their relationship, there are moments of tenderness between Chris and Jules. Chris steps in to protect Ella from her abusive father, revealing a protective instinct that likely stems from his priestly past. He offers Jules comfort after she suffers a miscarriage, showing a capacity for empathy and understanding. However, these fleeting moments of connection are ultimately overshadowed by their destructive behaviors and the oppressive atmosphere of the boarding house, which itself represents their shared emotional decay. Sexual desire as a temporary reprieve. The book depicts a strong sexual attraction between Chris and Jules. Their physical intimacy provides them with a temporary reprieve from their pain and a sense of connection they crave. However, this physical intimacy further complicates their relationship, blurring the lines between genuine affection and a desperate need for escape. How they slipped into an erotic purgatory, emphasizing the temporary and ultimately unsatisfying nature of their physical connection. Escalating destructive behaviors. As Chris and Jules become increasingly entangled, their destructive behaviors escalate. Chris turns to alcohol and pills to numb his guilt and pain. Jules's mental state deteriorates, and she begins to experience visions, possibly as a result of her grief and drinking. The sources note that their individual struggles start to escalate, culminating in a shared downward spiral fueled by addiction and delusion. A tragic end. Foreshadowed. Throughout the story, the narrative offers hints of the tragic fate awaiting Chris and Jules. The recurring imagery of roses, beautiful yet thorny, symbolizes the pain that their love will inflict. The oppressive atmosphere of the boarding house foreshadows their entrapment and the destructive nature of their relationship. The ambiguity surrounding the supernatural elements, particularly the visions, hints at a blurred reality where escape becomes impossible. In the end, the fire that consumes the church, a place symbolic of Chris's past and their shared darkness, serves as a final, devastating act of both destruction and potential redemption. The love story in Sacrilege is a cautionary tale about the dangers of seeking solace in shared darkness. It highlights the complexities of human connection and the destructive potential of unaddressed trauma and guilt. While Chris and Jules find moments of comfort and connection in each other's arms, their relationship is ultimately doomed by their inability to confront their demons and escape the oppressive weight of their pasts.
Part 5. A complex intertwining, guilt and faith in Sacrilege. The book depicts a complicated relationship between guilt and faith, particularly as experienced by the protagonist, Chris Corelli, a fallen priest. The story explores how guilt can erode faith and how the loss of faith can lead to a further descent into guilt and despair. Guilt as a catalyst for the loss of faith. Chris's journey begins with a profound sense of guilt stemming from an undisclosed sin in his past. This guilt weighs heavily on him, leading him to question his faith and ultimately abandon the priesthood. The act of throwing his priest collar into a ditch symbolizes his rejection of his former life and the beliefs that once defined him. His diary entries reveal his inner turmoil, his struggle to reconcile his actions with his religious beliefs. He grapples with questions of forgiveness, redemption, and the existence of God, suggesting that guilt has shaken the foundation of his faith. Seeking solace in escape, Chris seeks refuge in the boarding house, hoping to escape the judgment of God and the consequences of his actions. He turns to alcohol and pills to numb his pain and suppress his guilt, further distancing himself from his former life of faith. He engages in fleeting sexual encounters, seeking temporary solace and a distraction from his inner turmoil. The book emphasizes the destructive nature of his coping mechanisms, highlighting how guilt drives him towards self-destructive behaviors that are antithetical to his religious upbringing. Confronting past sins and supernatural encounters, the boarding house, revealed to be a former church, becomes a symbolic representation of Chris's past and the sin he is running from. The book suggests that the house itself could be a conduit for supernatural activity, further blurring the lines between reality and Chris's guilt-ridden conscience. His encounters with Ella's ghost, potentially fueled by his guilt over her death, challenge his understanding of the afterlife and force him to confront the consequences of his actions. Jules' struggle with faith and guilt. Jules, the woman who runs the boarding house, also grapples with guilt and faith. She carries the burden of losing a baby and blames herself for the tragedy. She seeks solace in storytelling, sharing fantastical tales with Ella as a way to escape the harsh realities of her life. Her attraction to Chris, a fallen priest, further complicates her relationship with faith. She challenges his beliefs while also seeking validation for her own experiences with the supernatural, suggesting a longing for spiritual understanding despite the pain she has endured. The question of redemption. The story raises questions about the possibility of redemption in the face of overwhelming guilt. Chris's actions, particularly his decision to drink with Jules and engage in premarital sex, represent a violation of his vows and a further descent into sin. However, his protective instincts toward Ella and his attempts to comfort Jules in her grief hint at a lingering capacity for good. The sources leave the question of redemption open, suggesting that even in the midst of darkness, the potential for forgiveness and healing remains. The book depicts faith as a fragile construct, easily shattered by guilt and trauma. It explores how guilt can drive individuals to seek solace in escape, leading them further away from faith and into self-destructive behaviors. While the story offers no easy answers regarding redemption, it suggests that confronting one's past, seeking forgiveness, and finding solace in genuine connection can offer a path toward healing and a restoration of faith.
Part 6, Sacrilege, an exploration of dark themes. The book highlights several dark themes interwoven throughout the narrative of Sacrilege. These themes contribute to the unsettling atmosphere of the story and force readers to confront difficult aspects of human nature and the enduring power of the past. Loss of faith and spiritual crisis. Chris Corelli, the protagonist, is a former priest grappling with a profound loss of faith. Haunted by an unnamed sin from his past, he rejects his religious beliefs, symbolized by his act of throwing his priest collar away. He seeks solace in alcohol, pills, and fleeting sexual encounters, further distancing himself from his former life of piety. The book emphasizes the torment of his spiritual crisis, depicting his struggle to reconcile his actions with his beliefs and his inability to find peace outside the confines of the church. Guilt and trauma. The story is steeped in guilt and trauma, impacting both Chris and Jules. Chris carries the weight of his past sin, which remains shrouded in mystery, but clearly torments him. Jules is haunted by the loss of her baby and the abusive relationship she endures. The boarding house itself becomes a symbol of their shared trauma, a place where they seek refuge but also confront their demons. Abuse and manipulation. The book depicts several instances of abuse and manipulation. Jules is trapped in a relationship with a controlling and abusive man who isolates her and belittles her. Ella, the young girl who visits the boarding house, is also a victim of abuse, suffering at the hands of her controlling father. The story exposes the vulnerability of those who are manipulated and the devastating impact of such toxic relationships. Mental illness and deterioration. Both Chris and Jules exhibit signs of mental and emotional deterioration throughout the story. Chris's reliance on alcohol and pills, coupled with his haunted visions, suggests a descent into addiction and delusion. Jules's grief over losing her baby manifests in erratic behavior and a blurred sense of reality. The book tracks their downward spirals, showcasing the fragility of their mental states and the destructive power of unaddressed trauma. Death and the supernatural. Death is a pervasive presence in Sacrilege. The story begins with Chris contemplating the death of his mother and continues with the tragic deaths of Ella and her father. The boarding house, later revealed to be a former church, takes on an eerie atmosphere as both Chris and Jules report seeing Ella's ghost. The narrative never definitively explains the nature of these supernatural encounters, leaving readers to question whether they are genuine paranormal phenomena or manifestations of the characters' guilt-ridden consciences. The search for redemption. Despite the darkness that pervades the story, there is a glimmer of hope in the characters' search for redemption. Chris, though deeply flawed, exhibits moments of compassion and protectiveness, suggesting a lingering capacity for good. Jules, despite her pain and grief, finds solace in storytelling and her brief connection with Ella. The ending, though ambiguous, hints at the possibility of finding peace and forgiveness even in the midst of tragedy. Through its exploration of these dark themes, Sacrilege offers a thought-provoking commentary on the human condition. The story compels readers to grapple with the complexities of faith, guilt, and the enduring impact of the past, leaving them to ponder the possibility of redemption even in the darkest of circumstances.
And there you have it, Sacrilege by Barbara Avon. Have you read it? If so, drop a comment below and let us know what you thought. And if you haven't, does this one sound like a must-read for you? If you enjoyed today's deep dive, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more book deep dives, and share this video with your fellow book lovers. Until next time on Deep Dive with Smart Bookworms, keep reading, keep growing, and we'll see you in the next one.